Elena Voss stood at the edge of the forest with her wedding dress still on, listening to the sound of horses behind her. The dress was heavy with pearls her father had borrowed money to buy, and every step she took away from the castle felt like a small betrayal of everything she was supposed to be. But she did not turn back. She could not marry King Damien Cade. Not after what she had seen him do to the villages that refused to bow to him. Not after what he had done to her own people. Her father had signed the agreement without asking her. A marriage to secure peace, he called it. A marriage to save what was left of their Pax land. Elena understood the weight of duty, but duty had never asked her to smile at a man who burned homes for sport. So 3 hours before the ceremony, she had climbed out through the kitchen window and run. She did not run without a plan. There was only one man in the kingdom powerful enough and angry enough to shelter her from the king's wrath. Lord Ashton Marrow, the exiled commander who had once led Damien's armies before a falling out, stripped him of his title and his land. He now ruled a smaller territory, near the northern border, a place people called cold and forgotten. Elena had sent a letter to him a week earlier, though she had not been certain he would answer. He was waiting for her at the crossroads, exactly as his letter had promised. He sat on a dark horse, wrapped in a traveling cloak, his face unreadable in the moonlight. "You actually came," he said, when she stopped in front of him, breathless and shaking. "You said you would help me," Elena answered. "I am holding you to that. Marrying you is not simple help, Lady Voss. It is a declaration of war." "Dino," she said, "I am not asking you to protect me for nothing. I am asking you to marry me, so Damien has no claim over me anymore. In exchange, I will bring you the knowledge of his court, his soldiers, and his weaknesses. You get an advantage over your enemy. I get my freedom. That is the trade." Ashton studied her for a long moment, as if deciding whether she was foolish or brave, perhaps both. Then he offered his hand and helped her onto the horse behind him. They were married the next morning, in a small stone chapel, with no flowers and no guests, only a tired priest who did not ask questions. Elena wore a borrowed grey dress instead of pearls. Ashton wore his traveling clothes, still dusted from the road. Neither of them smiled. It was a contract dressed as a wedding, nothing more. But when Ashton took her hand to place the ring on her finger, something happened that neither of them expected. A warmth spread up Elena's arm, sudden and undeniable, like a current passing between them. She gasped softly. Ashton's eyes snapped to hers, his jaw tightening as though he too had felt it. The mate bond, the pull that every wolf and instinct inside her recognized instantly. But that was impossible. She already believed her true mate had been someone else, a stranger from years ago whose face she had never seen clearly, whose voice she still remembered on quiet nights. Ashton released her hand almost too quickly. "It seems this marriage is more complicated than either of us planned," he said, his voice flat, guarded. "I don't understand," Elena whispered. "I thought—" "It doesn't matter what you thought." He turned away before she could finish. "This changes nothing. We married for strategy. That is all this will ever be." She did not argue. But that night, lying awake in the guest chamber of his cold, quiet castle, Elena could not stop thinking about the warmth of his hand and how it felt achingly familiar, like a memory she could not quite reach. The weeks that followed were strange and careful. Ashton kept his distance, treating her more like a guest than a wife, though he was never unkind. He gave her a room with a view of the mountains, ensured she had warm meals, and asked nothing of her except the information she had promised. Elena, in turn, tried to be useful, sharing details of Damien's court, his allies, and his patterns of movement. But it was during quiet evenings, when Ashton would sit across from her reviewing maps by candlelight, that Elena began to notice small things. The way he tilted his head when he was thinking. The rhythm of his breathing when he was tired. It reminded her of someone from long ago, though she could not place why. Then one evening, as they discussed the villages near the eastern border, Elena mentioned a raid that had happened years earlier, before the war between Ashton and Damien had fully begun. She had been young, barely 17, traveling with her father's convoy when raiders attacked their caravan. "I remember a masked man saved us that night," she said quietly, almost to herself. "He fought off 6 soldiers alone. He carried me to safety, when I twisted my ankle running. I never saw his face. He wore a hood the entire time, but I remember his hands. They were warm, steady, like nothing could shake him. Ashton went very still. The quill in his hand paused over the map. "You remember his hands?" he asked, his voice careful, almost hesitant. "I know it sounds strange," Elena said, embarrassed, "but I have never forgotten that night. Something about him felt— it sounds foolish now, but it felt like he was the one meant for me. I thought it was a childish feeling. I never spoke of it to anyone." Ashton set down the quill entirely. His eyes, usually distant, were fixed on her with an intensity she had not seen before. "What convoy was it?" he asked. "What road?" "The Northern Trade Road, near Hallowmere. It was autumn. I remember because the leaves were falling everywhere, and I thought it strange that something so beautiful was happening while soldiers were trying to kill us." Ashton's face changed, just slightly, a flicker of memory passing behind his eyes. He stood abruptly and walked toward the window, his back to her. "That was me," he said finally, his voice low. "I was riding through that territory, scouting for weaknesses in Damien's supply lines before our falling out became official. I heard the attack. I did not know who I was helping. I only knew someone needed it." Elena's heart pounded. "You were the one who carried me." "I did not know your name," Ashton said. "I did not stay long enough to learn it. I had my own war to fight." He turned back to face her, something unguarded finally breaking through his composure. "If what you are saying is true, then the mate bond we felt at our wedding was not new. It was always there. We simply did not know it." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, though she could not say if they were from relief, disbelief, or something deeper. "Why didn't you tell me? When we married, when you felt it too, why did you push it away?" "Because I did not trust it," Ashton admitted. "I thought perhaps Damien had arranged it somehow, a trick to weaken my judgment, to plant doubt or a spy in my house. I have learned not to trust good fortune. It usually comes with a price." "I am not a trick," Elena said softly. "I am not here to weaken you." "I know that now," Ashton said. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just in front of her. "I am sorry for doubting you, and I am sorry it took me this long to admit what I felt the moment I placed that ring on your hand." For the first time since their wedding, Elena allowed herself to hope that this marriage, born of desperation and strategy, might become something real. But their fragile peace did not last. Word reached the castle only days later that King Damien had discovered the truth of Elena's escape and her marriage to his greatest rival. Furious at the insult, he declared it an act of war, using her abandoned wedding as justification to march his army toward Ashton's territory. Scouts reported that Damien's forces were 3 days from the border, moving faster than expected, eager to punish both Ashton and Elena for what he saw as a humiliation he could not ignore. The castle prepared quickly. Soldiers reinforced the walls, supplies were gathered, and messengers were sent to nearby allies who owed Ashton old debts of loyalty. Elena, though untrained in combat, refused to hide away while others fought for a war she had caused. "I want to help," she told Ashton as he studied battle formations late into the night. "You have helped enough already," he said gently. "The information you gave me about Damien's weaknesses will save many lives in the coming days." "That is not enough for me," Elena said. "This war exists partly because of my choices. I will not sit quietly while you defend what is yours, what is ours." Ashton looked at her for a long moment, something soft passing behind his stern expression. "Ours," he repeated quietly, as if testing the word. "Very well. Stand with me on the wall when they arrive. Let them see we do not fear them." When Damien's army arrived at dawn 3 days later, banners raised and drums beating, Ashton stood at the front gate with Elena beside him, refusing to hide behind stone walls like a coward. Damien himself rode forward, his expression twisted with fury and wounded pride. "You stole what was mine," Damien shouted across the field. "A promised bride, a broken contract, and now you dare to stand against me with her at your side." "She was never yours," Ashton called back, his voice steady and unshaken. "She chose her own fate, and fate chose us both, long before either of us understood it. She is my true mate, recognized before pack law and blood. Your claim over her was built on force, never on bonding. It holds no weight here. The soldiers on both sides murmured, the weight of Ashton's words settling over the battlefield. A true mate bond, publicly declared, was sacred among their kind, impossible to dispute once acknowledged before witnesses. Damien's face darkened with rage. Then we settle this the old way. Single combat, as our laws demand. Winner takes the disputed territory and all claims within it. Ashton did not hesitate, agreed. Elena's heart clenched with fear as Ashton stepped forward onto the open field, but she forced herself to remain steady, remembering his own words to her only days earlier, "Do not fear them." She stood tall at the gate, refusing to look away even as the two men circled each other, blades drawn, years of rivalry and bitterness finally coming to a head. The fight was brutal and swift. Damien fought with cruelty, relying on force and intimidation, but Ashton fought with precision, earned through years of discipline and loss. Elena watched every movement, her breath caught in her throat, praying silently for the man who had saved her twice now, once as a masked stranger, and once as the husband who had finally accepted the truth between them. In the end, it was Ashton's control, not his anger, that won the fight. He disarmed Damien with a final decisive strike, leaving the king kneeling and defeated in front of his own soldiers. True to their ancient laws, Damien's remaining claims over the contested territories, including Elena's home pack, were forfeited. The battlefield fell silent, then erupted into cheers from Ashton's soldiers and the villagers who had gathered nearby, hoping for exactly this outcome. Elena ran across the field without thinking, throwing her arms around Ashton the moment he turned to face her, relief and joy overwhelming every fear she had carried. "You came back to me," she said, tears streaming freely now. "I told you," Ashton murmured against her hair, "some bonds are stronger than any war." In the months that followed, Ashton and Elena worked together to rebuild what years of conflict had damaged. Elena's home pack was freed from Damien's oppressive rule, and under Ashton's fair leadership, the territories began to heal. Villages that had once lived in fear started to trust again, crops grew steadily, and children played without the constant shadow of war hanging over them. Elena often thought back to that desperate night when she climbed out of a window in a wedding dress, running toward an uncertain future with a man she barely knew. She could not have guessed then that fate had already tied their hearts together years earlier, on a quiet autumn road, where a masked stranger once carried a frightened girl to safety. What began as a marriage of convenience, a desperate escape dressed as strategy, had become something neither of them expected, a true and lasting bond, chosen twice by fate, and finally, willingly, by each other.